the meeting to order. First order of business will be the minutes of March 15th.
After viewing the minutes and after I spoke last time, I do not have my federal firearms license. I have to go through this process before I can actually get that license. So we just need to change that, and other than that, I think we're good.
You just have to say has applied for.
Has applied for, yes.
Anything else anyone has? I'll entertain a motion.
Move the minutes be accepted as amended regarding Tom Ayers' request.
Second.
All in favor? Minutes are approved. Public hearing right now for a home occupation application from Tom, who is now taking a seat in the audience, leaving us with a quorum of 5, so we're okay. Tom wants to open up a home business for selling firearms and ammunition at his home at 910 Grimes Road in Caribou. This has been advertised. It has been reviewed at least briefly by the planning board one other time. Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to speak to this?
Neighbors were notified. Neighbors were notified.
Okay.
So that tells me what I need to.
Yeah.
And the hearing's closed 1 minute after it opens. We may now discuss it.
I have to leave the room. Okay.
Does anyone have any comments to make, questions?
It's an R3, right?
Correct.
Yes.
So
If we go down the review criteria checklist, it's relatively short. We need a copy of the deed. We have it in hand. Names and addresses of all abutting landowners were listed last time I looked. Somewhere, this big package. Copy of the tax card and tax map for the property with the zoning designation, and that is in the package. A complete set of plans showing the following. Graphic scale in North Arrow. I know that's in there. One of the diagrams. No. They're not paying me to find it.
I just have a question for clarification, and this is for this instance, but also other businesses that have already been established. If a business like this were to change, and let's say he's selling the firearms and the ammunition, and then somebody wanted to test it, would that have to come back and say he wants a change in his plan? if something like that happened, is that monitored?
Well, in order to test this permit, going forward, it would go to appeals. and
Are you
come back
talking
to
to
this
test the
board.
firearm? or-
Correct.
Oh, to test the firearm.
So if he had like a shooting range where people could test it. I mean, where that's a change from the initial plan, something like that would be monitored?
If he had a change in use and he wanted to offer another service, yeah, I think it would come back.
Okay. Yeah. That'd be my only, I mean, selling it I don't have a problem with, I just, if it went to that point.
Okay, well, truth be told, I can't find the north
Is that
arrow,
the
but
correct
I'm
change
not
in
worried
use?
about it.
Well, I guess I have to look into things, maybe we can ask the.
You think there'd be an arrow on this?
If you're out far enough, I don't know if it's illegal to discharge a firearm on your own property.
Correct. Yeah.
And if that's the case, then.
Oh, yeah, because he's outside the urban
Oh,
compact
right.
Yeah,
zone,
it's
so
compact zone, you have to be out past the compact zone.
Okay.
right, he's well past that.
Yeah.
So, if someone wants to go out and test a firearm and he's outside of that, then it wouldn't be a problem.
Okay. Just, I guess, clarification, if something were to change, then based on this particular instance, it wouldn't be a problem because it's outside of that zone.
I'm trying to do that.
Unless the neighbors started complaining of all the gunshots, I would think that, I mean, right?
Correct. And that's, yeah.
Then that would have to be brought back to you guys, the city of Caribou to.
Right, that's something that the council would then have to look at, do we want to limit the discharging of firearms in the city as a whole rather than just in the
But
compact?
this is only for.
Correct. This is just for sale, I
sale.
think, yeah.
Well, as I said, I can't find the north arrow, but I'm not gonna make a big deal out of that.
Yeah, the graphic scale and the main geo parcel map has a graphic scale. You're right, I'm not seeing the north arrow.
From that location, we pretty much know where north is. It's not a deal breaker. Graphic scale is there. Location and dimensions of existing and proposed easements are shown in the deed. Size and shape of the buildings are shown in the deed and attached sketches. Access for emergency vehicles, I've been there, there's plenty. It's flat land and there's a driveway that goes straight in, has access to all the buildings. This is not new construction. We know the names of the street adjacent to it. Happens to be the Grimes Road. Conceptual treatment of landscaping, buffers, screens, and plantings, I'd suggest to the board that that's not applicable. I forget what was said about signage last time. Anyone have any memory of that?
Signage is allowed, it's less than, I believe it's 1 foot by 2 feet, so it'll be a small sign.
So it'll comply.
Yeah.
I don't believe he's gonna be lighting the signs. What do we have on the second page of the checklists? This is one of the things, I don't think this is a problem in this instance, but this is one of the things that Ken pointed out to us as a dichotomy within our regulations. One part of the regulations say that you can only employ residents in a home occupation, and another part of the regulations say that 2 or 3 other people could be employed in a home occupation that aren't residents. So we're gonna have to straighten that out. But in this case, we're pretty sure that Tom's gonna be the employee. Any objection to that interpretation?
No, I think that's correct.
We know it shall be carried on entirely within the principal or accessory structure. %50 of the total floor area, that's a pretty good bet. You wouldn't want to take his house, the rest of the house away from the rest of the family. He says, and if he needs more space, he's got 2 or 3 barns or garages on that property. I'm gonna keep everybody on the first floor because there's no sprinkler. It's a given. Only objectionable noise that could ever possibly happen would be firing of weapons, and I don't see that happening a lot. And they're a long distance from anybody else. On-street parking won't be necessary, so it's a non-issue, in my opinion. Now, what do we do with Life Safety Code and ADA? Do we need to ask him to build a ramp?
It'll have to be ADA compliant, I'm sure of it. It's a business.
Yep.
There's quite a few
Is
in
it,
the
is
town
it
that don't
enough
comply.
to accommodate people to come out of the house to their level? So he can make accommodations, you know what I mean?
Right, I mean, he's,
Well, we can make that a condition of approval.
You could just say any applicable ADA requirements would have to be met. Because a lot of them probably don't, where it's out of a home, and it's not new construction.
Got that, Denise? See below. All right, does anyone on the board have further comments or questions? Then I guess we can put it, is there an original here that we can sign? Assuming that there's a motion and a vote?
do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to
Okay,
approve
Okay.
the home application for Thomas Ayer, DBA Farmers Rebellion LLC.
Subject to the conditions, meeting ADA,
Correct.
applicable ADA requirements, okay.
Yep.
I'll second the motion.
Seconded by Phil. Any discussion on the motion? Take a vote, all in favor? Carries. It's approved. This will be coming down for everyone's signature. Everyone to sit here at the table, not Tom's. Thank you. You're in.
Thank you.
We do have one condition. If there are applicable requirements for ADA,
Absolutely.
then they'll have to be met.
Yep. Yep.
So, on the conditions. You gonna write that in?
Uh,
Let's take care of it. Yeah.
If they're recorded in the minutes, I'll make a brief note. All right, done and done. Pass those back to Denise. Ken? Takes care of that. Now again, the zoning work is ahead of other stuff. The zoning work runs an indeterminate amount of time. So I suggest we deal with new business and new communications and then go back to deal with zoning. Any objections?
Nope.
All right, so then the next item would be to consider scheduling a public hearing for a use permit application from the Ripley's for sale and service of overhead garage doors at 320 Bowles Road, which, if I remember correctly, is also way out in the boonies.
It's out in the R3. Initially, the permit came to us on the 30th, and we took a look. The permit fee was charged and paid. We reviewed the application, and the only concern I had on first blush was that it's close to the resource protection area surrounding the Little Madawaska River. But on further research, I find that the building that they would be doing business is indeed 250 feet away from that river. The river embankment on the opposite side of the road is very, very steep, so the high water line is virtually at the edge of the river.
Is this almost at the end of Bowles Road?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Mr. Ripley?
No, my name is Josh Cheney. I'm Mr. Ripley's.
Oh, I should have recognized you, I'm sorry.
Yep.
I have met you before, but I'm not good at that.
And so I'm thinking that this is a good and complete permit application. It should be noted it would be conditional upon sale of the property, correct?
Yes, sir.
And Mr. Cheney is here if you'd like to ask some questions on behalf of the Ripleys.
I don't personally have any issues with this. And I'm willing to entertain a motion to refer it back to code enforcement.
Is that because it doesn't need a public hearing?
There are 3 abutting landowners. The homes are a good distance away. I think one of the homes is within 500 feet, the other ones are not.
It's not exactly
Was
a
that-
noisy business.
Was that garage or shop, I guess, has that ever been used?
That was built
As a
initially,
business?
they were doing welding out of there.
Okay. But it never, from your research, it's never come before us with regards to a business.
I did not come across a prior application for a business. I did come across all the paperwork, and the prior code enforcement did not consider it to be a shoreline issue. Various permits for electrical, for construction of the actual garage.
So is there enough room for a tractor trailer to get down and turn around and get up in there to drop product off?
Easily.
Looks to me like
Yeah.
a nice time.
Yeah, there's plenty of room there.
Especially since we had recently had a look at an aerial photograph of a trailer.
On-road parking will not be an issue.
No.
Great. So does this need a public hearing or not?
I think that that's the planning board's decision.
Yeah.
When I went through, again, my initial research, I went to the land use tables, and I went to, it shows a planning board decision is to be made.
Which land use did this fall under? Would it be
A commercial.
commercial?
So it was a sales and service type situation for overhead doors.
I've been up there.
It's up to the board.
I make a motion, we approve the request.
Second.
Any discussion?
I just want to look at the chart real quick.
I'll wait for my esteemed colleague. Okay, I never called you that, did I?
Sorry to say, are there any? Are there any?
Is there signage? Is there gonna be signage down by the road?
He doesn't anticipate a need for signage. If it's permitted, then he may put out a small, I think that, one by
The
two
permitted
was
sign
mentioned.
would be small sign.
You might have a small sign so the trailer truck driver could find it, but there's not, it's not a high traffic area like the public needs to see.
Is this more of gonna be a storage facility, or?
Storage, and they will have service trucks that get parked inside the garage overnight. He said that if they get 1 to 2 dozen visitors of any sort per month, that would be a lot. So there should be no appreciable impact on traffic.
Is he gonna be living in the home, or is it?
That's too, I think that long term he would like to be able to,
Okay.
but he has other business concerns to attend to elsewhere as well.
So are we looking at this as a home occupation, or, because otherwise. I
Because
mean,
that's the next thing, that's why. I
right,
kinda
because
asked
that would lead me to think it's gonna be a wholesale business at some point, so. And based on the
The
current
permit that was
land use.
taken out was a general use permit.
Why does it have to be wholesale?
Was my understanding it was sales and service. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's.
So basically, so in theory, we're looking at it as a retail use then?
Correct.
Okay.
Did you?
Are you good?
Almost.
Almost, okay.
Almost.
Roll it. Currently as it is.
What is it you're looking
There
for?
I want to make sure that if it's a retail space and then you have an accessory residential, whether it's going to impact and required parking and stuff of that nature.
That building is a long way away from the house.
Well, it is, but it's the fact that
They're
you're
gonna
gonna
have
have
R3 though, I mean,
Right. But we still have the requirements for parking, regardless whether it's an R3 or
Yeah,
a
but-
C2. I just want to make sure that we've covered everything if we're going to approve it tonight.
sounds like it's gonna be more of a warehousing facility than.
In the historical documents, there was actually a scale drawing. So it looks to me like the driveway is nearly 300 feet long,
Right.
The main
Yeah,
road.
no, it's a very long driveway. I just,
with a series of parking areas past the garage and again at the
Right.
end of the driveway.
so, I mean, it's ultimately going to boil down to how we're going to classify it. If we classify it as a retail business, we have to make sure there's adequate parking based on square footage. If we're going to do it as a warehouse, then I believe parking restrictions are a little different.
Well, it's not retail in the sense of lots of shoppers stopping in.
Yeah. So I mean, if we look at warehouse,
Well, there's,
if we base it as warehouse activity, then we're required one parking spot per 500 square feet of floor area. Which I think there would probably be enough there, but it all depends on how we're gonna classify this particular
Well, worst case scenario, what would the parking be for retail?
Do you have the size of the building?
Well, let's just look at the property in front of the building.
Because there's a considerable difference between,
The parking area in front of the building is nearly the size of the building.
It's 300 square feet.
300 square feet.
So that'd be 6 for the warehouse.
With the warehouse, yeah, you'd need 6 spaces versus,
The building is 300 feet.
300 square feet, it's 50 by 60.
That's 3,000.
yeah.
3,000.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, that's it.
So, yeah, I mean, for retail, you're gonna need 1 space per 150 square feet of floor space. So if you get 3,000 square feet of floor space, there's probably not gonna be adequate parking
That's
there.
20 spaces.
That's 20 spaces.
And there's plenty of room for
I
20
I think
cars.
I think you got room for 20.
I mean, that's just
For
a
the
matter
whole
of.
And that's
You're looking at
that's an
tier
almost
2
far
range.
out scenario.
Yeah.
But,
I can't see,
but we need to be thorough in that. Because if something happens down the road and somebody chooses to contest this, then it comes back onto our shoulders because we approved it.
Is there, if I might ask, so a portion of the building is going to be warehouse, and another portion is probably gonna be showroom?
The discussions that we've had, basically, there would be about a 10-foot section of wall that they would use to display some of the different panels that they sell. The rest of it will be warehouse, vehicle storage, that sort of thing. So the retail space would be minimal.
100 square feet.
And that makes sense. You're looking at something, these doors take up a lot of space.
I think we're all
So-
set, Phil.
I think as the retail portion, it would be.
They have a room designated, I would assume it'd be the office, and the retail space is 12 feet by 14 feet.
They're just over 150 square feet.
Yeah, so there's,
Okay.
Okay, and I wanted to throw that out there because, you know, we're not doing our due diligence if we don't look at it depending on how it gets classified, so.
Yeah, you could certainly say that out of the 3,000 square feet, this percentage is gonna be warehouse, and so you need 6 parking stalls,
Right.
plus an extra one for the retail space, so you have 7 parking stalls.
Right.
Just base your motion on that.
Yep.
Well, we could modify the motion
go ahead.
to the effect that it's a motion to approve based on its use as primarily warehouse, with retail being an auxiliary activity. If those are the right words.
Ancillary.
Ancillary, thank you. And if everyone agrees to that modification,
I had made the motion. Who seconded it?
I think I made a motion, you seconded it.
Yeah.
She would
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, I think.
Who made the motion? Who made the second?
I'll keep that motion with the
I-
additions.
I recall me.
Phil made the motion.
Phil
Yeah,
made the motion.
and-
I apologize.
You made the first one.
Who seconded?
who's on second?
Okay, so I moved, and I concur with the amended motion.
Second.
All right. The motion's been amended. The secretary has our, not our secretary, Denise has our language. Is there, how many approve?
Say again?
All in favor? Sorry, I said the wrong thing again. All, any opposed? None. All right, let's approve.
So that's approval, we don't need a public hearing.
No, I don't think we need a public hearing.
No, if it says planning board approval, then planning board just approved.
Okay, we'll come up with the proper language and state it in the letter to the Ripleys and Mr.
Yeah. The agenda was to consider scheduling a public hearing, and we've decided we don't need one.
You did consider it.
Is it in poor taste for me to leave now?
No, we
Happens all the time, John.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks,
Thank
Josh.
you.
See you.
Just talking about that today, I was at a town meeting down in Massachusetts once, and the article under consideration was a big piece of money for a new fire truck. And every call fireman and volunteer fireman and their wives were all in the hall. And then they got a page. 2/3 of the hall left to answer the page. All right, new communications, please, Ken.
Very good. This past month, it's starting to get interesting. I think spring is sprung and people are starting to move around a little bit. We've had a couple other permits go through that were approved by the CEO for our land use tables. We had one general use, which was the reestablishment of a beauty salon at a past beauty salon spot on 515 Main Street.
539.
539 Main Street.
Was that the one up?
County Cuts, I believe it's
Massey's?
called.
That's, yeah,
Yep.
they opened it.
Yep. Yep. And that was conditional on an inspection she needed to get her state licensure, and I think that's already taken place. Another one was Mayor Lee Scott. And before I go into that one, I must say that Phil McDonough II will not be here this evening. He sends his regards. But he was concerned about this one home occupation, thinking it was a massage type thing.
Was he?
So he's a little concerned about that because of off-street parking. But the business that this lady will conduct is as a personal trainer. So she wants to do the business of her office work in her apartment on 515 Main Street. But she will be going to people's homes and advising people to their personal training needs.
So she's not gonna be doing anything,
Both physical and spiritual.
she's not gonna be doing anything out of her residence except for that's where
No,
her
she'll be
business
doing
is.
her bookkeeping out
Okay.
of her residence.
That, and I had a concern with that too, given the building makeup of it as well, being that it's an apartment building, so.
Yeah. And she intends it, if she gets to a point where she can do larger classes, she would entertain looking at the wellness center, maybe counter physical therapy.
Renting space where she's, yeah.
And both of these ladies were, I think, showed a lot of forethought in coming in and seeking out permits.
Well, I met Miss Calloway in another capacity recently, and I was impressed with her organization. Had nothing to do with this.
So that's great. Things are starting to happen. So I was happy with that. In addition to that, of course, the Ripleys came in. We've had some other things happen as the snow melts. Okay, we've had some violations and some complaints. We had on Main Street, we had a junk vehicle that was being parked in the yard. Sent out a letter in that regard, and it was corrected.
Yeah, I noticed that.
And I sent out another letter thanking him for his attention to that issue. Also, we had rubbish piling up at another property on the the West Presque Isle Road. And again, the landowner got on top of that, cleaned up his mess, and I sent a letter promptly thanking him for his attention to that issue. We do have an ongoing issue that regarding sidewalks and driveways near Cubby's in the downtown area. Basically, there's a Bilco door that's been in that sidewalk for 100 years.
Mm-hmm.
But over time, it's becoming more and more of an issue. It's bent and curled up. It's got to be leaking into the building. It's a tripping hazard. It's an issue where they try to clear the sidewalks in that area. So that's ongoing. I will meet with the owners down there and we'll talk about that. My initial approach to this was going to be maybe they could look into a facade improvement program and we could tie the Bilco door to that. That's just one thought. So that's a conversation I need to have.
Is Cubby's renting that space, or do they own it?
I believe they own it. I think that was the Fitzgerald's
Yeah,
most
I'm
recent.
sure
record.
Dottie would have preferred to sell it rather than.
I'll look into that as well.
Where's the Bilco door?
It's on the back
Oh,
right corner. If you're coming down Record Street, it's at the far back side where you would hit Stevens Street to go.
Okay.
So again, with permits, we've had Riverside Primitives and Design, we approved. We've had Farmers Rebellion approved this evening. Miss Galloway doing county cuts. Miss Scott doing did I say fitness planning, fitness. We've had the Ripleys that we just spoke about, and we've had a demolition permit that we took out for the raising of the Powers building down on Railroad Street. So we've attended a bunch of meetings, city council, planning board. We met with the county FCU commercial loan department. They were concerned of the things they should know when they're doing residential type loans. And we had a nice conversation with those folks. I think we're all on the same page. Certainly they should look for building permits if they're going to do loans for residential construction. So, and the like. Age-friendly community, we got our official designation, our plaque in the mail. We were the first in the county. Here's another one. Limestone's keying up to do theirs. I hear through the grapevine that Bill Flagg is doing a small planning grant. We'll convene our committee and we'll move forward on being age-friendly here in the city of Caribou. We've heard from another possible business interest in town, more of a wholesaling type application. So only persons licensed in the industry would be able to purchase items through his store. It's kind of on the low down. He didn't want to disclose any names. Housing Board of Commissioners will be convening our new Board of Commissioners. They will be meeting next week. We sat with Tri-Community Landfill. Ongoing talks of the pending merger with the city of Presque Isle and Daily Business. Training, we've done land use zoning. Passed the test. We've been CEO certified, 18.
Are you having fun yet?
My life has become a series of tests. Shoreline zoning test I took a week ago, that's pending. It takes a while to get back from Augusta whether I passed or not. Also office training, ergonomics for office guide, interviewing office pass folks. And so that was a quick march.
Well, you're definitely up to speed.
And as you mentioned earlier, Penny did find a discrepancy between our traditional code book, Chapter 13, and our international code book regarding home occupations. And the biggest discrepancy is who could work there, whether or not they'd be residents or if additional persons could be hired. At this point, the way we need, and we've talked about it, at this point, how we would have to read this is the more restrictive ordinance would be in effect. So we wouldn't be able to allow any further employees other than the people that live there. So, but these are the kind of conversations we can have while we're going through Chapter 13.
Yeah, if we're trying to move towards the international model, then we have to keep those things in line to make sure that wording gets fixed.
A couple things to consider is are we trying to preserve the residential area aspects of our neighborhoods, or are we trying to be a little bit more business friendly and maybe getting a few more jobs out there?
I think there's got to be a happy
So
medium between that.
that's the conversation.
Yeah, part of that conversation needs to be if we allow people other than residents to work there, then there better be adequate off-street parking for them. And that needs to be spelled out.
Yeah, it's gonna open a whole other litany of things that need to be handled. Because, you know, at that point, you're almost turning it into a retail aspect of it. So, you know, I'm sure
Oh,
there'll be
no, it
life
doesn't have
safety
to be
issues.
retail, it could be
Well,
manufacturing.
but still, we're gonna, that leaves that open by loosening the restrictions for a home occupation.
Right, but as a for instance, if a CPA was open in their home and they had their son-in-law come and was going to take over the business and was working there, technically that wouldn't be allowed.
Right.
Have we gotten the international books in yet?
We got the brand new, the 2015 updates,
We got them in.
National Building Code, International Residential Code, Energy Code. Our library is full. We haven't got the standards done, but Penny was going to look at the standards. So, incidentally, the residential construction book,
Yeah. Yeah, I was gonna
that
ask
is a
about
training guide for my next steps. It's about that thick. So yeah, it's 863 pages. I'm told you can pick up a tutorial. Maybe we'll look into that. And that's all I had for new business and communications.
Well, your plate is certainly full.
It's becoming fun. We're actually, I guess in addition, we're actually showing a prospective business interest at 60 Access Highway. Think about reusing that space. We've had more than one interest in that space. We've shown it a couple times.
Where's,
That's the Mecon building,
oh,
right?
okay, that's what I was gonna
That
say.
would be great. If that could-
There may be additional activity down to the Catholic Charities building, depending on what use that they propose to come in with. So they're still gonna come back and do their traditional retail type business, but there might be other activities going on.
I noticed that the bar and grill that we recently approved up in the Dodo site is up and running with a Facebook page. And
They've been on again and off again.
Really?
I think they're trying to hit their stride. I think the fire marshal had issues with them as of late.
Place is packed.
I believe it was
It is.
packed. Yeah. Overflow crowd from the warehouse, maybe. I don't know.
I would have said that you had plenty of parking out there, but it
There's nowhere near enough.
hasn't been enough parking. No parking on the side of the road and everything
Yeah.
out there.
Are they doing that for convenience?
No, I could be because of the snowbanks are still doing, but
Yeah.
when we approved that, it
It's
was.
very, very tight there, and I think there was suggestions of parking down behind the building. I think if it's something that they had mentioned, if
As
I
an
recall
overflow?
correctly. Yeah,
The space is restricted in the back part of that building as well.
yeah.
There's not much space between there and the road.
Excuse me. Keep an eye on it. All right. Let's plow on to chapter 13. We invited Mr. Marker to come tonight because we want to talk about this. It's pretty clear to me, Dennis, why you've got certain lines marked in red. Let's get rid of them because we don't need them. Blah, blah, blah. But I'm curious why we added an ag zone.
It really depends on what your purpose is with the outlying areas. Past experience, I've seen that sometimes the farmers appreciate knowing that they've got their own zone that they can do things in that's different, unique, that also protects them and their operations. Right now, the R3 zone is so broadly written, any use can go in anywhere, which that's not necessarily a bad thing. And so if you want to leave it that way and just leave it as an open book, anybody can come in and do things. That's why you could do things like a garage door warehouse facility out in the R3 zone because it's written that way. So it's just something to maybe consider looking at. We utilized them in the past that sometimes people put in ag zones to say, we don't know what we want it to do, we don't know what we want it to be when it grows up, so we'll just make it an ag zone. And then when somebody comes in and wants to develop it, then we'll change the zoning. You can treat it that way, or you can treat it as we see agriculture as a viable industry of its own. And anything that goes into that agricultural area needs to be supportive of agricultural industry, the uses. So it could still be your cold storage, your packing sheds and those things, but you're trying to focus in on what can we do to support those uses in that area. And so your development standards might be slightly different in an ag zone as opposed to, your parking standards, for instance. If somebody wants to put a packing shed in an ag zone, you're so far out there and there's plenty of room, do you want to require them to put in asphalted parking stalls? So it's a tool that maybe you could consider if you wanted to treat the agricultural industries differently than your warehouse or your other industries or your retail establishments. But again, if you want to leave it as an R3 zone everywhere and just leave it open-ended and let anything happen that wants to come in, you could do that too.
I most certainly understand the whole ag zone thing, and throughout history, especially up here in the county, when a farmer says, geez, I'm gonna tie it up and that'll be it, and usually it goes to another farmer. I get it. I don't know. As a farmer myself, I don't think it's really necessary. I mean, there's no way you're going to get any of them to asphalt their driveway.
Right. Well, this is Northern Maine.
Well, yeah, I know. But I get it. I do get it.
One of the other benefits, if I might, sorry,
Yeah,
interrupt, is that in an ag zone, because you have proscribed certain things and prescribed certain things to go in there, it also changes the potential valuation of properties. In an R3 zone where you can do warehousing and commercial and other things, you could also do that on the farm property, which means as they go out and get assessed and appraised, they're looking at, well, what is the potential value of the property? You can do all these other things on it. And so potentially you're also inflating the taxable value of a farm, whereas if it had a special designation in agriculture and you don't have those same abilities, and it's a two-edged sword. On the one hand, you don't have the same abilities, and so you can keep your values lower, you don't pay as much taxes on it, but if you want to do something on it, you have to come back and get a rezoning. So it's...
What about a zoning overlay? Does that have any use in this discussion?
Like what, an ag overlay?
Yeah. I mean, do we actually assess property based on what they might do with it versus what they are doing with it?
That's how you assess property. You look at what is the potential value of the property, and anytime you have an appraiser go out and look at it, they're looking at what is the highest and best use of the property. And so they're looking at what is the zoning and what could you do with that.
So farmers are getting assessed for potato fields based on they could be house lots?
There is some looking at what is the current use of the property. And so they do take that into consideration, but they are going to look at what could they do there. If it's going to go fallow and you could do something with it, if it has utilities, could it be developed as raw ground?
I think that has more possibility if you're on the edge of town.
Sure.
Closer to the downtown area. But as you get farther out, the prospects of a housing development, you almost need to have, a sewage system in there, and in regards to an ag zone, I personally view it as another bunch of hurdles for potentially somebody. I view it as more restrictions, and if anything, my personal motivation is to loosen things up. We don't want to impede any activity, and so more restrictions potentially could backfire on us. So I just as well leave it as an R3, the way it's been for 50 years or whatever.
Yeah, many communities are actually trying to preserve agricultural lands, and they're using different techniques in their subdivision laws, for instance, in that a farmer might well decide that he's going to retire, but he would actually sell his development rights to a contractor who then could take those rights and develop another portion of town, so we can steer that development where we need it. Those techniques are used I think the last one I read about was in Unity, Maine, for instance. They're really concerned about losing their agricultural aspect of their community. So they're using these techniques to direct the development away from going into that 100-acre farm and subdividing, steering them back into town where all the infrastructure exists for that kind of development.
Yeah. Any farmer's greatest fear is urban sprawl. You know, you don't want your farmland taken away. I kind of.
I mean, you're seeing a lot of the smaller farmers getting gobbled up by the bigger ones anyway now.
Well, farmland is let's just say there isn't an abundance of it up for sale.
No.
Right? I mean,
there's not.
before I found the parcel where I built my house, where I'm out on the Washburn Road, I approached a number of farmers looking to buy 20 acres. And the response I got over and over again was, "Are you kidding me? I need more land with this every 2 or 3 year crop rotation. I don't have enough acreage as I am now. I'm not going to sell anything because I'm looking to buy, not, you know, because if the potato processors only allow potatoes once every 3 years or something like that on a piece of land, then you need more acreage to be able to comply with them."
This crop rotation deal, I mean, it's good because you're getting higher yields out of your fields, but I think we're not struggling, but it's sometimes some years it's more difficult than the rest, you know. But the yields are amazing on the crops that are rotated. It's a proven fact. You rotate out crops and grain, broccoli, potatoes, whatever, you know, you're going to get higher yields.
Yeah, there's no question that that's beneficial.
I like this overlay thing, you know. So, and I don't want to make any decisions tonight. I'd like to talk.
No, we're not here to make a decision.
I'd like to talk to some farmers and see, kind of get their take on all this. But if we could preserve agricultural land in this municipality, I think that would be a huge benefit. And as far as assessing, when somebody comes in and says, well, this is zoned for ag, this is what it's going to be, it's ag, there's no more potential, then that's going to help out all the farmers around here. And let's face it, things are getting older and everybody's looking to put more money in infrastructure, especially on a farm. You know, 4230s, they're a wonderful tractor, but they're older than I am, you know. I mean, so that's how I feel about it.
I mean, I'm not opposed to adding it either. I think it would be beneficial, especially when you look at some of the things that we can do and or not do. And do we want to just let this pop up here? I mean, the prime example is the slaughterhouse is the first thing on the list. You know, yeah, right now we can put it in R3 with planning board approval, but as long as they meet the requirements, you know, it could be next door to your place. You won't have anything to say about it because we have to approve it. So, you know, I mean, there's rules and, you know, restrictions based on certain zones that we have, and I think that's what we're striving towards, is trying to make it more fluent for everybody. But by that same token, we don't want to make it so loose that Ken's inundated with 15 requests, and, you know, we're meeting once a month and not really covering anything. You know, there's stuff that I think needs to come before us, but we need to make sure that we have everything in line before we try to streamline our entire process.
I mean, if I might also share another aspect of an ag zone that I've seen work really well and that the farmers appreciated is oftentimes as you get out into the R3 zones or, you know, these more rural zones, you start like saying you've got to have a 2 acre, 5 acre minimum lot size. Well, farmers that have a kid that comes back to town or they want to just create a little building lot for their, you know, son or relative or, you know, daughter or whatever, well, for them to create a building lot, they now have to carve 5-10 acres out of their farm, and you create, you know, you're splitting up the farm, even though, of course, they're probably still going to use the land the same, but legally you've now had to split the farm. And so sometimes what you can do with the ag zone is say if you're going to create a, you know, inheritance lot, that lot could be a half acre in size, even though anywhere else in the zone, you might have to have 5 acres or 10 acres of ground.
Do you then get restrictions on whom those half-acre lots can be sold to down the road?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
But your zoning, your development, or your subdivision of the property is a density-based zone, not a minimum lot size zone. You see, if you've got a 100-acre piece of farm ground, you've already got a house on the corner of it, you know, you could maybe put 2 other home sites on there, and your density is 1 home per 30 acres, but you only have to carve off a half-acre
Cluster,
lot.
yeah.
And that way you can also help consolidate infrastructure to serve the homes off the same wells. You don't have to separate the homes because we've had to carve off a 5-acre piece of ground somewhere. So just some other flexible tools that you can build into the zone that make it work better.
Well, I think that somebody needs to take a look at the land that's out there and begin to carve out with a different colored pen what makes sense to be agricultural versus just plain old R3.
Well, we want to hear back from Tom's inquiries of other farmers. I guess,
Oh,
you
yeah.
know, you need to make a list of what are the advantages and what are the disadvantages. What's, you know, everything's a compromise in life, and so, you know, whenever you change something, it's going to improve somewhere and make it worse elsewhere.
Yeah, we don't want to dump this zone on guys who are out there with their land doing their work without letting them have some input.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
You could even have a special public hearing and send out focused notices to the farming community.
Just to get their input on what they would like to see in an agricultural zone.
You say, please come talk to us. This is something we've been checking
I
out.
like that idea.
Yeah, I don't think that's a bad idea at all.
Yeah, because we're, you know, most of us are city folk. We're working in a little bit of a vacuum here when it comes to agriculture.
So I guess the other thing that I would like to see would be some samples of some definitions of other municipalities that have an agricultural.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we need exactly, we
You know,
need,
see what other people's have for definitions and see how we can make something.
Unity
You know, in the
has
event-
some, Ken? Unity is.
Unity's kind of an interesting one. They're I
Have they
guess-
already implemented?
They're in a high-growth area, and
They're the one
protection
extreme,
mode, yeah.
you know, and you've got other communities that are more liberal than Caribou as far as land use and the other, anything goes type of thing.
So
So
Unity's been.
I'm still fairly
notorious
new to me. I
agricultural.
don't know the communities around here, but I know where I came from. We received recognitions from the National EPA for the ag zone that we treated specifically for these kinds of purposes. And so,
Yeah.
but this process is the same. You've got to get the farmers in the room. You've got to talk to them, figure out what they want, don't want.
You've gone through this before back in Utah.
Yeah.
And it was pretty welcome feeling from the farmers over there.
It was mixed.
It was
honestly.
mixed, yeah.
You know, you had some farmers that, yeah, we want to be protected. We don't want those other uses allowed around our operations because it impacts us.
Mhm.
And others said, we see it as a stripping of our potential to do something with our property. And
Yeah.
we only put it on the farms that want it. You know, we didn't force anybody to be zoned agriculture if they didn't want it, but we at least had it in the toolbox that,
Now let's say we zoned a field. The field, one of the fields we own is the Grant Farm right across from Spruce Haven on the Doyle Road.
Mhm.
If we zone that ag, and then I came back and said, well, geez, I'd like to put I'd like to carve a portion of this out, how difficult would that be for the planning board to rezone it to that? What hoops would I have to jump through? All of that, is that
the same as any rezoning process.
same as any, so it really wouldn't be crazy, I don't think.
Well, you gotta keep in mind
Well-
too, I think it just occurred to me that a lot of the farmland now is owned not by individuals, but by corporations. And I don't know if corporations are gonna give a rat's tail about a carve out of a 1 acre lot, as you call it, an inheritance lot.
Right.
So
That's,
We're back to needing input from the people that got their feet on the ground.
Wouldn't that be considered a spot zoning?
I was about to say,
Yeah,
that's
you
what I
only
was
see a
gonna say.
patchwork of
No.
A's all over the
No,
place.
it wouldn't
You
be.
wouldn't be?
mm-mm.
So I could technically, let's say that farm was zoned ag, I could technically put a new cooler there, or I could put a packing shed there without having to come to the planning board and saying, this is what I'm gonna do.
It depends on how it's written, but you could do that. That's what we did in Santaquin. We said, if you're gonna put a cold storage in, and it's right there in the zone, that's supportive of the agricultural industry, and you do it.
If you look at what he's got spelled out right here, you know, if you look at agricultural sales and service, it's right there. It's in the ag zone, you
Yes.
can do it. Agricultural personal, yes. Commercial, yes. You know,
So we
you wanna put an animal shelter in there, go ahead.
Yeah. So we would just need permitting and that would be it. Just come in and,
It could be a real advantage for them.
Right.
yeah, absolutely. It could be.
But the trend is towards farmland protection.
Right, well, and I mean, I'll bring up a prime example of, it's Irving's now, but when Ayers put their Quonset hut on Route 1, just south of of Doc's Tank Farm there,
Yeah.
you know, had that been zoned ag, then they wouldn't have had, you know, their neighbors across the street, I think a couple of them complained about the sounds of the fans and the lights.
In the
But,
plans, yeah.
you know, at that point, that's already protected, that's an allowed use there. You know, it may not necessarily be neighborly, but I mean, they're looking out for them too, so,
Right.
you know, that would have,
Or even closer, the Sutherland farm did the same thing.
exactly, on South Main, yeah.
I had a doctor of education that studied these things for many, many years, and he pointed out to me that oftentimes it's the agricultural industries that have the most longevity. Obviously, they've been here since the dawn of time,
Right.
and they're
I was gonna say, people gotta eat.
and so oftentimes we dismiss them because they've been here for so long, and everybody wants to just try to attract the new manufacturer or the new business. But if there can be things put in place to protect the agricultural industry and enable them to be more profitable and be able to,
Well,
do their
you know,
operations, that's,
Let's face it, farmers up here, we're more of a consumer, buying parts that, Napa Advanced, we're Crown, we're really putting more money back in because, let's face it, stuff breaks down. And trying to employ people, and I mean, with our operation, we really don't, but, they're employing my brother and I. We live here.
How many mouse you feed?
At my house, 5.
5 children.
Wow. Dennis and I are on the same level.
Feeling your own.
But,
bulk.
yeah, I think, is there any way you can get some studies maybe back from Utah, from the doctor, and see what he has found, and just maybe email it to us?
well, I'm sure there's tons of literature on agricultural preservation and methods, and
I think we should have a meeting with the farmers, get a definition of an ag,
Yeah.
and just build from there. I mean, yeah, it's gonna slow down us finishing chapter 13, but,
You've got some things in your ag column, like, I'm looking at campground or RV park. That's, on an R3, that's a planning board, but with an ag, it's a yes. I mean, I guess I'm kind of comparing the ag
That's
column
strange.
to the R3 column to see what are the differences, and some of the things that you identified as yeses in the ag are surprising me, such as a campground or RV park.
See, I can see where that makes sense. 'cause
yeah, but if you look at his note to the
a lot
side,
of
He wants
farmers
to get the
down
county
south,
law.
when they do apple picking or blueberry picking, they have people that literally travel around the country. They park their RV, they go work for the farmers, they pick all the apples, and then they move on to the next orchard, move on. I can see.
you'll also have farmers that have festivals on their farm to promote what they're doing,
Right.
and
Yeah.
temporary campgrounds and things.
the
Or
off to the side says recommending changing planning board to yes.
Yeah.
So anything that's PB, he was making a sweeping change to that.
Tom, you could have a helipad.
A helipad? No.
Why would you want that?
Helicopters go
Oh.
straight down. Airplanes glide.
Never mind, I'm in the wrong column. Forget my column.
But I think that's, I mean, I think it's definitely something worthwhile for us to look at, because I think the potential uses that we can help guide to where, you know, are best suited for the interest of everybody.
It sounds like it relaxes things for the farmers.
Right.
So it makes it, so it doesn't take away privileges for the farmers, it gives them more privileges. I guess it gives them more say over their own property.
Again, it depends on how it gets written, but yes.
You know, yeah, 'cause
Potentially.
It'll give Tom the ability to put up a package shed. He puts up a package shed that's gonna increase the valuation of his land. You know, so in turn, it's just gonna,
Well, if it's for farm use.
I think it's worthwhile to look at. I think there's a definite niche for it.
Now, just kind of shift gears, the agricultural product processing, and we're gonna now take agricultural product storage and put it in with product processing? Is that right up at the top where that red, we're gonna completely delete that?
Whenever you start looking at the uses, it comes down to definitions, right? And how much do you want to split hairs with every single use that's out there? So it's a recommendation that I have, that if you've got it under product processing, don't add another use if you don't have to.
Yeah.
I would like to propose some action items for Ken. And we can move this discussion forward. What I've written down here is, unless there's disagreement about the red deletions, to move forward with those, especially where it's already permitted. Tighten up the table that way, get rid of the things that are redundant. Maybe help come up with some definitions where Dennis has made the point, we need to define what this is. Then there's definitions out there in the industry that you could incorporate. Remembering that everything that you do becomes a proposal that we'll have a hearing on at some point. But most importantly, based on our discussion tonight, I think it would be really great if we could somehow schedule a public meeting with the agricultural community.
That would be
Try to learn
historic
what
in nature. I don't think it's ever been done.
Well, that's exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. Now,
We might have to move it to a different venue, depending on the response.
well, I can tell you this, don't do it in May, because everybody's gonna be planting and breaking ground, and
Snow hasn't left yet, Tom.
it's gonna.
Could we do a
I'm
lot of
thinking
meetings
ahead,
next
man,
Monday?
I'm thinking ahead.
Cup's half full, I know, I got you.
I know it.
No, absolutely, I'm not saying we were gonna rush ahead with this, but I'm thinking more like next fall when harvest is done, and people are relaxing a little bit,
In November?
yeah?
You know.
What do you think? I mean, you're gonna be in
I
attendance.
would say,
Depends on how long you want to take.
usually everybody's in June, people are cultivating, we're spraying. June is, I think people could make away in June.
Doesn't it ultimately depend on when you guys get in the ground, though?
Yes and no. For us, yes and no. Potato guys, it might be a little different, but yes and no. I mean, because-
Their frequency of getting in planting is all gonna depend on when Mother Nature decides she's gonna
Yes.
let us go.
See, like with us on broccoli, I can put that seed in the ground. When it grows, it's going to grow. But it all depends on the heat units we get from the time that seed's in the ground to when it actually happens. I mean, any cold crop, it could say 55 days. You get higher heat units, it could be 45, 50
40, yeah.
days, you know. I would say June, and let's let's see. Is there a way to do an RSVP on that? I mean,
Anything possible?
Maybe send something out and just
Gotta
poll
start
them as
with
to
the
see when we can
newspaper
do
article.
something.
Some kind of a newspaper blurb that
Well-
says, here's what the planning board would like to do.
Mail something to the farmers and just gather input from them, you know. We're looking at trying to do this, give them a range and say, when would work best for you, and then just take the consensus and plan around it from there. I mean, we're not gonna make everybody happy regardless.
That's right.
You know, but we definitely don't wanna drag it on to the fall, because, I mean, there's so much more that can transpire between now and the fall that we could be closer to being done.
Yeah, I'd say June. Let everything, let the dust settle in May, something in the middle of June. Because once,
June-ish.
you know, late August, September.
And we don't necessarily have to have,
everybody's gonna be hurt.
we don't necessarily have to have it at a regular meeting. We can have a
That's
public
right,
hearing
exactly.
whenever. So if they say, you know, if we could get a consensus that the first week of June is gonna work for everybody, then plan something for the first week of June.
I'd go second, but.
Well, I'm just
Yeah, I
I'm just
hear you.
throwing that out there, you know.
I hear you, yeah, no.
Because the second week we're gonna have our meeting, we will be having our
We'll be
meeting
having our
typically
meeting.
then anyway, so.
Okay. Can you, can you do that?
June-ish.
June-ish.
June.
I like that.
Like I said, anything's possible, except for the mailing. I mean, we're gonna advertise in local papers anyway.
Right.
We're gonna have a special meeting, so that's not a big deal. Now, a mailing is a different type of challenge, because we don't want to miss anything. So we want to get a good listing of who's doing agricultural applications.
I think maybe we should start with the newspaper approach and see what kind of response we get before we worry about mailing out to everybody and then missing people, as you say.
Because a lot of farmers, you know, they have land in Limestone, Fort Fairfield, Caswell,
And same way with
still
limestone,
in Caribou.
farmers have, in limestone have land here, so.
Yeah, so.
Yeah, well, let's, you know,
Yeah.
put it out there and see if we get their attention.
Yeah.
If nobody
Advertise.
shows up, then we'll know what the level of attention
We
will
want to advertise, we'd like to hear back from them if they're going to make a meeting.
Sure.
RSVP.
And I was gonna say, you may want to, well, if you can, it'd be interesting to do it, but just start word of mouthing it a little bit. And
Oh, absolutely.
Ken, you may want to just reach out to some that you know personally and
see what
to
they
say, hey,
We actually generated quite a list through another group that we're working together on, so we could actually go with that list.
Mhm.
If you've got email addresses, it would be easy to just pop a question out there. What if we did this? What would your reaction
I
be?
would,
Well, you wanna,
I would say face-to-face with the farming community is the best way to
Well,
go.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Follow the professional's lead, always.
A lot of land deals up here are still done face-to-face handshake
Yeah.
deal. You know, just how it is. You got 60 acres? Yeah, I got 60 acres. I got 75. Well, okay. I'll get you back next year. You know, I mean, it's just how it's done.
No, in terms of
Land
Use for-
rental, yeah.
Yeah,
the
use
land
for
rent,
particular
swapping
property,
crops,
yeah.
yeah, stuff like that.
Okay, good stuff. Do we need more to do more work tonight, or is, where are we, board?
There was one other thing we couldn't quite define, and that's the bright red. Because no one was quite sure what our LUP.
Oh, it is bright red, isn't it?
That was required, I believe, all the way across.
So that would mean a change to the health and the airport, it's from no to yes.
Yep.
So
R1 to R2.
the RLUPA is the Religious Land Uses and Institutional Persons Act. Okay, basically means that we cannot create land use regulations that discriminate against any religious base or faith-based entity. Okay. And it also says that in any zone that you have where residential uses are allowed, you have to allow a religious institution. And so right now, because all of the zones allow residential, you would have to permit religious facilities in them. So that's the basics of it.
It kind of surprised me with the health. You know, usually you go into a hospital and you see a room that's a little chapel, you know, in the hospital itself.
Mm-hmm.
And that's no currently.
Yeah, well, that's gotta be fixed.
Yeah, that's one of those things that's,
My notes say, just do it.
Yeah, that's.
yeah, and I thought that's what we had discussed.
Yep.
Meeting or two ago as well.
Well, we couldn't figure out what the an acronym stood for, so I wanted to get that out. And do we allow that in the agricultural as well?
if you're gonna allow residential in the zone, then you have to
Residential
allow,
has to be allowed, right?
right.
Religious land use, what was it?
An institutional persons act.
Institutional persons act?
So it's not necessarily what you think of as religion. It may just be that it's a club or group that gets together, you know, an institution of some kind. But
When was that enacted?
I want to say late 90s.
Is that a federal thing, state thing?
Yeah,
It's a federal.
federal.
Yeah.
Yep.
Makes sense.
All right, good session.
We still have our training as well. Did you have something for us, Dennis?
I'm sorry.
I think we've talked quite a bit tonight about ag zones, if you want to count that as your training.
Sounds good to me.
We can bring back some more information on that, though, for you.
We have a motion?
I motion to adjourn. Evan?
Second.
Too many? Yeah.
I was taking it. I was taking it.
I assume the vote is yes, and the motion is carried, and we are adjourned.